I didn't cry at her funeral. I thought I would. I thought the grief would crack me open like it did the night I found her, curled in that faded recliner she loved, a half-knitted scarf still in her lap, the TV whispering static into the silence. I thought the weight of losing the only person who ever stayed would be too much. But I didn't cry. I stood there in my stiff black suit, one I hadn't worn since my last court appearance 6 years ago, and stared down at the pinewood box they lowered into the earth like it was someone else inside it. Like I was watching a movie about someone who looked like me, whose mother died, whose face had forgotten how to mourn. Rain fell in quiet threads. Thin. Relentless. Like the sky knew I wouldn't cry, so it did it for me. Only 3 people came besides me. 2 of them were the neighbors from across the hall, Janet and her husband Marvin, who used to bring my mother soup when her hands were too tired to cook. The third was the preacher. Young. Nervous. Like he was reading her eulogy from a page someone else wrote. He called her Margaret, which no one had called her since the 80s. Everyone else was dead or disappeared. Just like him. I lit a cigarette before I even left the cemetery gates. I'd quit 2 years ago, but grief has a way of digging up all your bad habits and handing them back like old friends. That's when I saw him. Leaning against a rusted car across the street. Gray coat. Hat pulled low. No umbrella. Just standing there in the rain like he'd been waiting. Watching. My stomach nodded. My hand went cold around the cigarette. Because something about him felt off. I walked fast. Across the street. Through the puddles. Toward him. You lost? I asked. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. He reached into his coat. For a second I braced myself, reflexes from a life I don't talk about. But it was just a letter. Yellowed at the corners. My name on the front. Caleb. Who are you? I asked. A friend, he said. Of hers? He shook his head. Of his. The chill wasn't from the rain anymore. What are you talking about? He held the letter out. He asked me to find you. Before it's too late. I didn't take it. Not right away. Just stared at it like it might explode. He's dead, I said. Has been since I was a kid. The man looked me in the eye then. A look that felt heavy. Sad. No, Caleb. He's not. I took the letter. Didn't open it until hours later. Back in my mother's apartment. The one I'd grown up in. The one that smelled like old books and peppermint tea and quiet sorrow. Her presence lingered in the dust. In the untouched stacks of crossword puzzle books. In the sweater draped over the back of her chair. I sat in that chair. My knees hit the coffee table like they did when I was 10. The envelope was sealed with wax. Deep red. No return address. Just my name. I opened it. If you're reading this, then I'm almost gone. And you still think I'm the devil. I froze. You have every right to. I left. I hurt people. Her. You. Myself most of all. But I didn't die. Not like she told you. And I didn't stop thinking about you. Not for a single day. I set the letter down. Stared at the wall. My mother lied. She told me he was gone. Said it with tears in her eyes and a photo in her hand. Said it the night I asked where he was. Said it every time I screamed his name in nightmares. She made me believe he was dead. And he wasn't. The letter went on. There are things you were never told. Things I never got to say. But if you'll let me, I'll say them now. One letter at a time. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know the truth before I leave this world for good. Enclosed was a second piece of paper. An address. A city I'd never been to. And at the bottom. If you want to look me in the eye before I die, come soon. I'd like to hear my son's voice one more time before I go. That word. Son. It rattled something loose in me. I didn't know what to feel. Grief? Anger? Hope? I looked around the room. At the space she filled. At the silence she left behind. And I knew. I had to go. Not for him. But for the boy I used to be. The one who waited at the window. The one who screamed into pillows. The one who needed answers. The next morning, I packed a bag. And I left. Because some ghosts don't stay buried. Some come back in the rain. And call you son. The road to the address he gave me was long. Not just in miles, but in memory. It took 8 hours to get there. I drove through rusted-out towns and nameless exits. Through stretches of land where the air felt thicker, like it remembered too much. The kind of places that held stories in their cracks and whispered them to anyone who stayed too long. The house was small. Plain. One story with paint peeling off the siding and a porch that sagged in the middle like it had exhaled too deeply. The kind of place that looked like it had spent years trying not to be noticed. I parked across the street. Sat there for 20 minutes. Engine off. Just watching. Wondering what kind of man waited inside. Wondering if he looked like me. If he drank his coffee black. If he walked like someone who regretted everything. I don't know what I expected to feel. But it wasn't what I felt. I felt nothing. Not the kind of nothing that means peace. The kind of nothing that means too much. I walked up the steps and knocked. 3 times. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. There was a rusted lawn chair near the door. I sat. Waited. After 10 minutes, I heard a voice behind me. Didn't think you'd actually come. I turned. There he was. Gray hair. Lines carved into his face like dry riverbeds. Eyes like mine but older, emptier. He had a cane in one hand and a paper bag in the other. You look like her, he said. I didn't answer. He opened the door. Left it wide. You coming in or just here for the view? I followed. The inside was cleaner than I expected. Sparse. No pictures. No warmth. Just furniture and silence. Like a motel room someone forgot to leave. He sat across from me. Lit a cigarette. Didn't offer one. How much do you know? He asked. Enough to know my mother lied. He nodded. Yeah. She did. Why? He took a drag. Because she was scared. Of what? He exhaled. Smoke curling around his words. Of what I used to be. I leaned back. Tell me. He looked down. Fiddled with the lighter in his hand. I wasn't kind. I drank too much. Yelled too loud. Broke things I couldn't fix. I never hit her. Not once. But I scared her. And that was enough. I remembered the slammed doors. The way she'd flinch at loud noises. The way her voice would drop when she said his name. So she left. She ran. He corrected. Took you in the middle of the night. Left a note and never looked back. And you let her. His jaw tensed. What was I supposed to do? Drag her back? Drag you back? I didn't answer. I thought maybe it was for the best, he said. That she'd keep you safe. That I'd ruin you if I tried to stay involved. But you didn't die. No. I let her tell you I did. He looked up then. And for a second, he didn't look like a man at the end of his life. He looked like a boy caught in the act. She asked me not to call? Not to write. Said if I really loved you, I'd let you grow up without me. So I did. And then you changed your mind? No, he said. Then I got sick. I waited. Pancreatic. They gave me 6 months. That was 8 months ago. I looked around the room again. At the stillness. The half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. The medical papers in a stack by the door. He wasn't lying. So why now? Why write me? He tapped ash into a tray. Because I don't want to be a ghost. Not to you. Not when I can still speak. We sat in silence. 2 men separated by time and guilt. Then I asked it. What did you do that made her so afraid of you? His hands shook. Just slightly. I wasn't afraid of being a bad father, he said. I was afraid I'd become my father. He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. I understood. Because fear is contagious. And if you don't treat it, it turns into legacy. He stubbed out the cigarette. Looked at me for the first time like I wasn't just a visitor, but something more. You don't have to forgive me, he said. But I'd like to know who you became. I didn't speak. I didn't leave either. Instead, I reached for the bottle on the table, poured a second glass, and slid it toward him. He nodded. And we sat. Not as father and son. Not yet. But as two men trying not to vanish before they were seen. It was the second night I stayed. The old man, my father, I guess, slept most of the time now. Painkillers took the edge off, but they also made him drift. He'd talk in his sleep sometimes. Names I didn't recognize. Apologies to ghosts I couldn't see. I made coffee that morning just to give my hands something to do. His kitchen was too clean. Too still. No magnets on the fridge. No bills or flyers. Just silence wearing a shirt and tie. I found the letter by accident. Not in a drawer. Not in a box marked Caleb. It was tucked inside a copy of A Farewell to Arms, a paperback with curled corners and a cracked spine. I only picked it up because I'd read it in high school and hated it, and I was curious what kind of man kept Hemingway by his bed. The envelope wasn't sealed. No name on the front. Just 3 creases where it had been folded and unfolded too many times. I pulled it out. I wish I could say I didn't read it. But I did. And it changed everything. Ellie, you asked me once if I ever thought about going back. I think about it every day. Not because I think she'd forgive me. Not because I think he'd want me around. But because I can't look in the mirror without seeing the boy I never got to raise. Ellie. A name I didn't know. A woman who wasn't my mother. I should have left sooner. When you asked me to. When you said you didn't want to share me with the past. But I couldn't. Because even though I lost him, I never really let him go. Even if he thinks I did. I stopped reading. My hands were trembling. He had another life. I kept going. You were right. I wasn't built for 2 truths. I tried to love you and forget him, but the guilt followed me like a shadow. I saw his face in every quiet boy, in every kid who held his breath when his dad raised his voice. I couldn't run from him. Because he's still mine. A line had been scratched out. Hard. Like he couldn't bear to read it again himself. But I could still make out the last word, Caleb. He had written this about me. To someone else. I'm sorry for what I did to you. For trying to fill a hole with another family. You didn't deserve that. You deserved someone whole. Not someone haunted. I folded the letter. Put it back inside the book. Didn't touch the coffee. Didn't eat that day. I waited until he woke up. When he shuffled out from the bedroom, robe barely tied, eyes squinting at the light, I was already sitting at the kitchen table with the book in front of me. He saw it. Stopped walking. Where'd you find that? He asked. In the book. He didn't sit down. Didn't ask what I'd read. Just leaned against the counter like he might fall over. Who's Ellie? I asked. He took a long time answering. She was someone who tried to love me. When? After. After us? He nodded. So you tried again. Had a second chance. He shook his head. No. I just ran in a different direction. It wasn't a second chance. It was a cover story. I waited. I told her about you. Not at first. But eventually. She wanted me to forget. Wanted me to pretend I was someone new. And for a while I did. I let myself believe I could erase everything I left behind. Did you love her? I don't know, he said. I loved the silence. The permission to not be haunted. But that's not love. I pointed to the letter. You called me yours. You are. Then why did you try to replace me? He looked like he'd been slapped. I didn't. I couldn't. That's the point. Even when I wanted to build something new, I couldn't stop seeing you in every corner. That's why she left. Because she knew I wasn't really there. He sat then. Slowly. Every movement careful. That letter wasn't for you. But it was about you. And maybe that's worse. I didn't respond. Because I didn't know what I wanted from him. An apology? A confession? Or just something honest? You said you see me in every kid who holds his breath. He nodded. Did you ever see yourself in me? He blinked fast. Too much. That night, I sat on the porch with the letter in my lap. Tried to decide whether to keep it. In the end, I didn't. I lit a match and watched it burn. Not because I forgave him. But because I didn't want to carry a version of myself someone else never got to know. I was his. And he would have to say that to my face. Not just on paper. Not to someone else. To me. I didn't go back for closure. I went because I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more. That the silence my mother left behind wasn't just a silence, it was a story. The house hadn't changed since the funeral. Everything was still in its place, like she might walk back in any minute, purse slung over her shoulder, humming something from a radio no longer playing. I stood in the doorway for a while, keys still in hand, breathing in the familiar scent of dust and peppermint, of loneliness and quiet rage. I didn't cry. I just started moving. Room to room. Opening drawers I hadn't opened since I was a boy. Pulling back curtains. Tapping on floorboards. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Only that I hadn't found it yet. Her bedroom was last. It smelled like lavender and wood polish. The bed was still made, too neatly, the pillow fluff like she'd never laid her head there and cried. I checked the closet first. Nothing but sweaters, shoeboxes, and a stack of neatly labeled photo albums. Then the nightstand. That's where I found the envelope. No name. Just my mother's handwriting on the front. For when he comes looking. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. My pulse loud in my ears. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Folded once. A pen mark smudged in the corner. No date. Caleb. If you're reading this, it means he's come back. Or maybe you went to find him. Either way, there are things I never said. Things I couldn't say. I told you he died because it was easier than the truth. The truth was complicated. Heavy. And I was tired. Tired of fighting him. Tired of defending my decisions. Tired of watching you look out the window and ask if he was coming back. I wanted to protect you. Not just from him, but from the part of you that looked like him. That anger. That silence. That ache for answers I didn't know how to give. I closed my eyes. Her voice filled the room. Not her actual voice. But the shape of it. The way she used to say my name when I cried. The way she used to hesitate when I asked questions she couldn't bear to answer. He wasn't all bad. I want you to know that. He tried. In his way. But trying doesn't always mean healing. And healing doesn't always mean staying. I left because I had to. Because I saw too much of his father in him. And I wasn't going to let that echo carry forward into you. Maybe I failed. Maybe I made things worse. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Forgive me if you can. Not for leaving him. But for never letting you decide for yourself who he was. Love. Mom, asterisk asterisk. I sat there for a long time. The letter trembled in my hands. I thought I'd feel anger. Or betrayal. Or even relief. But what I felt was smaller. Sadness. Sadness for the way she carried so much alone. For the nights she must have sat in this room, holding this paper, deciding whether to burn it or keep it. For the version of me that always saw her as a fortress, not realizing she was mostly held together by willpower and fear. There were echoes in the walls of that house. I could hear them now. Her voice in the floorboards. His in the doorframe. Mine in the silence between. I walked to the living room. Pulled the photo albums down, one by one. Looked at every picture. Every moment. Every birthday and band recital and scraped knee. He wasn't in any of them. But he was there. In my eyes. In my posture. In the way I never quite smiled with all my teeth. I found one picture, me, 6 years old, sitting on her lap. She was reading to me, her mouth half open mid-sentence. I wasn't looking at the book. I was looking at her. Like I was searching for something even then. I closed the album. Put everything back where it was. Except the letter. That came with me. Because it wasn't just hers anymore. It was part of our story now. And I needed to hold it long enough to decide what I wanted it to mean. It started as a dare to myself. A quiet, reckless challenge whispered late at night, after too much coffee and not enough sleep. What if you just knew for sure? The letter from my mother hadn't answered everything. It explained her fear. Her exhaustion. It offered something close to love. But it didn't clear the fog. It didn't tell me if the man I'd spent the last week sitting across from was really my father. The man had never said it out loud. Not once. Not directly. He said things like, "You're mine," and "I saw myself in you." But never the sentence I needed. "You are my son." So I mailed the test. Swabbed my cheek in a stranger's bathroom. Filled out the form. Sent it off in a box that felt too small to hold something so big. Then I waited. 2 weeks. That's all it took. 14 days of wondering if identity could be boiled down to percentages and strands. If 20 years of silence could be undone with a data point. The envelope came on a Thursday. No return address. I opened it alone. I don't know what I expected. Trumpets? Shaking hands? A grand swell of emotion? I read the words. Probability of paternity, 99.9987%. It was him. The man who disappeared. The man my mother lied about. The man who broke himself into pieces and bled out over the years I was growing up without a name to curse. And suddenly it all meant nothing. And everything. Because now I knew. But knowing didn't fix it. I walked for hours that day. Through streets I didn't know. Past houses with warm windows and sounds of dinners and children laughing. I ended up back at his place after dark. He was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the television flickering soft shadows across his face. He looked small. Old. Not like a father. More like a boy who never grew out of his own hurt. I dropped the envelope on the table in front of him. He stared at it. Then at me. "Did you read it?" he asked. "Yeah." He didn't open it. Just nodded. "I never took one. I didn't need to." "I did. And now that you know." I sat across from him. "Now I want to hear you say it." He looked down. "Say it," I repeated. He was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, barely audible. "You're my son." It didn't echo. It landed. Soft. Heavy. Like a prayer said too late, but still meant. And I hated how much I needed to hear it. "Why didn't you say that before?" He swallowed hard. "Because I thought I'd already lost the right. That's not how it works. I didn't want to be wrong," he said. "Didn't want to believe I could have had something so real and ruined it so fast." I leaned back. "You didn't ruin it. You just never showed up to build it." He flinched. But he didn't argue. We sat in silence again. That familiar kind. The one that says more than words. Eventually he said, "What now?" I didn't have an answer. Because a blood test might prove connection. But it doesn't prove belonging. That has to be chosen. That has to be earned. I stood. Walked to the door. Before I left, I turned back and said, "You can't rewrite the past. But if you've got something left to give, now would be the time." He nodded. And for once, he didn't look away. I left the envelope on the table. Not for proof. But as a start. A beginning born in truth. Not blood. Not betrayal. Just truth. And maybe, if we're both brave enough, something new could grow from there. It was folded between pages of a book I thought I'd lost. I was back at my mother's house again, cleaning slowly, piece by piece. I hadn't decided what to do with it yet: sell it, rent it, burn it down. All I knew was that I needed to go through everything she left behind before someone else did. The book was on her nightstand, underneath a stack of crossword puzzles and receipts from the pharmacy. To Kill a Mockingbird. Her favorite. She used to quote it when she was tired or trying to make me believe the world wasn't as cruel as it felt. The photo slipped out when I turned to the first chapter. Old. Polaroid. Faded from time and sun. A man, a woman, and a child. Us. Or what I thought was us. I stared at it for a long time, the way you stare at something that should be familiar but suddenly isn't. My mother looked young, happier than I'd ever seen her. The man had his arm around her shoulders. He was smiling. I wasn't. I was staring off to the side. Blank. Like I didn't belong in the picture at all. There was something else. A detail that wouldn't let me go. The man in the photo. He didn't look like the one I'd just left sitting on his couch. Not entirely. The eyes were close. The jaw maybe. But the smile was wrong. The hair too full. The watch on his wrist, shiny, expensive looking, something the old man would never wear. I turned the photo over. In my mother's writing it said, Summer 1994. Lake Hartley. J. J. Not his name. Not even his initial. And suddenly, everything inside me went still. I drove back that night. Storm overhead. Wind loud through the cracked window. I barely remembered the road. Just the sound of my thoughts folding in on themselves. I didn't knock when I got to his house. Just walked in. He looked up from his chair. You said you never took a test, I said. I didn't. Then how did you know? He paused. Because your mother told me. And you just believed her? His jaw tightened. You didn't believe her about anything else. He didn't answer. I pulled the photo from my jacket and dropped it on the table. Who is he? He looked. Stared. Then closed his eyes like the image had weight. James, he said finally. His name was James. Was he my father? He didn't speak. I sat down across from him. You owe me the truth. You said so yourself? He ran a hand over his face. Looked older than ever. She wasn't sure. Not really. She said the timing lined up, but she wasn't sure. I wanted you to be mine so badly I didn't ask questions I didn't want the answers to. So you lied to yourself? Yeah. And maybe to you. But only because I hoped. And James? He was a mistake. A one-time thing. She told me that over and over. But mistakes can leave marks, Caleb. You should know that better than anyone. Was he around? No. Not after that summer. He moved away. Died a few years later. Car accident. I looked down at the photo again. My face still blank. My posture still stiff. Like I didn't know where I belonged even then. I look like him, I said quietly. You look like you. That's not an answer. He leaned forward. No, it's not. But it's the only one I've got. That night, I slept in my mother's house. I put the photo on the nightstand. Looked at it in the dark until the edges blurred. I thought about identity, how fragile it is. How we build it from scraps of memory and shadows of people who might not have ever wanted us in the first place. I thought about belonging. About how maybe it's less about blood and more about who shows up. About who stays. About who hurts, apologizes, and tries again. I didn't have answers. But I had questions. And maybe that was better. Because the man in the photo might have given me my eyes. But the man who stayed, who tried, who failed, who tried again, he was the one who finally called me son. And maybe that meant more than what the photo didn't show. He collapsed on a Tuesday. I got the call from a number I didn't recognize. A nurse on the other end told me he'd been admitted the night before. Severe abdominal pain. Dehydrated. Confused. They said my number was on a piece of paper in his wallet, written in faded ink beneath the word emergency. I didn't ask why they called me. I just got in the car and drove. The hospital was gray and quiet and smelled like bleach and old apologies. I found him in a room that buzzed low with machines and 4 drips. He looked like a ghost trying to remember what it felt like to be a man. His eyes were closed when I walked in. I stood at the foot of the bed for a long time. Watching. Breathing. Waiting for something inside me to tell me what I was supposed to feel. But there was no script for this. Just a chair in the corner and a silence that felt too familiar. So I sat. The machines clicked. The clock ticked. He didn't move. Eventually, a nurse came in, checked his vitals, smiled at me in that careful way medical staff do when they're not sure if you're the son or the stranger. Is he your? Yeah, I said. She nodded. He's stable for now. But it's not good. The cancer's spread. You'll want to talk to his doctor. When she left, I got up and walked to the side of the bed. He looked small. Not just sick. Small. The kind of small that comes from being worn down by your own choices. I sat beside him. Let the seconds stack up. Then I said it. You're not allowed to die yet. He didn't open his eyes. But he smiled. Barely. You came. Yeah, I said. I did. His voice was paper thin. Thought maybe you wouldn't. Thought maybe I wouldn't either. A pause. I left that number in my wallet 6 years ago, he said. I blinked. You thought I'd come back? No, he whispered. But I hoped. He drifted in and out for most of the day. When he was awake, we didn't say much. We didn't have to. There's a kind of knowing that grows in silence. A kind of forgiveness that isn't loud. But there was one thing I had to ask. Why didn't you write back? I said. After the last letter? He opened his eyes slowly. Looked at me like it hurt. I didn't know how to say goodbye again. Not after finally hearing your voice. You thought dying without a word would hurt less. He looked away. I thought if I disappeared slow enough, it wouldn't feel like leaving. I exhaled. Laughed once, bitter and broken. You always had a way of making pain sound poetic. He didn't deny it. Do you hate me? He asked. No, I said. I just hate what you gave up. He nodded. Me too. The next day, I brought him coffee. He barely touched it. But I think the smell reminded him of something good. Something warm. He talked more. About his mother. About the dog he had as a kid. About the summer he met my mom and how she'd beaten him at cards 3 nights in a row before he even learned her last name. He told me he was scared. Not of dying. But of leaving without leaving anything behind. You left me, I said. Not the same, he replied. Not like this. You think this makes it right? No, he said. But maybe it makes it honest. That night, I stayed in the chair beside his bed. He talked in his sleep. Said my name once. Said, I'm sorry, twice. In the morning, the nurse told me it would be soon. They asked if he had any family. I said he had me. And when he woke up, I sat close and held his hand. It felt wrong at first. Like touching a wound. But then he looked at me, clear-eyed for the first time in days, and said, I'm proud of who you became. I didn't cry. I just nodded. And when he closed his eyes again, I whispered, Thank you for calling me your son. Because in the end, that was the only goodbye I needed. And the only one I was willing to give. Grief doesn't always arrive dressed in black. Sometimes it wears your father's old flannel shirt, left folded on the chair beside his bed. Sometimes it smells like the mint gum he used to chew when he was trying not to smoke. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. He died 2 days after I held his hand. Quiet. No machine screaming. Just a soft exhale, like he was finally letting go of something he'd been gripping his whole life. I stayed after. Helped the nurse gather his things. Folded the blanket. Took the photos off the wall, ones he must have hung after I came back, because I hadn't seen them before. One of me and him at the diner. One of just me, standing outside my mother's apartment. A printout from his phone. Blurry. But it was there. He had kept pieces of me. Even when he wasn't allowed to. Back at his house, the silence was thicker. I sat on the couch where he'd spent his last good days, the envelope from the paternity test still on the coffee table. Next to it, a shoebox full of letters I hadn't seen before. Not to me. To himself. Journals, really? Short, scattered thoughts. Fragments. He looked like me today. God, I hope that means something. Did I ruin him already? I saw him smile and it wrecked me. She said he laughed like I used to. If I die without fixing this, I hope he knows I tried. I read every one. Each one cracked open a memory I didn't know I still carried. The sound of his boots in the hallway when I was 4. The way he'd whistle, always off-key, while making breakfast. How he'd tie my shoelaces double tight and call it Dad-proof. How I used to call him Pop, before I stopped calling him anything at all. There were memories hidden in my body, buried in the spaces between survival and silence. And now they were waking up. I opened the last drawer in his bedroom. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was a VHS tape. Labeled in shaky handwriting. Caleb, 3rd birthday. I didn't have a VCR. But I found one in a thrift shop 3 towns over. Plugged it in. Press play. The screen flickered. And there I was. Chubby cheeks. Too big sweater. Blowing out candles with both hands raised in victory. And his voice. Off camera. Laughing. Saying, "That's my boy." That broke me. I didn't even know I remembered the sound of his laugh. But my body did. My hands shook. My eyes stung. I watched it twice. Then again. I saw her, too. My mother. Younger, softer. Smiling at him when she thought no one noticed. We were a family, once. Even if just for a moment. Even if only captured on magnetic tape. Later, I stood in his kitchen and made coffee. His favorite mug still in the sink. A crack down the side. I washed it carefully. Poured 2 cups. Set one across from me out of habit. Then I spoke. Out loud. To the room. To the memory. I remember now. And I did. Not everything. Not perfectly. But enough. Enough to know he tried. Enough to know I loved him, even when I didn't know how to say it. Enough to know he was mine, as much as I was his. Grief, I've learned, isn't about what we lose. It's about what we carry forward. And I was finally ready to carry him. The word stuck with me. Son. 3 letters. A single syllable. But when he said it, when he finally said it, it cracked something open inside me I didn't know I was still holding shut. He never said it as an apology. Never as a performance. He said it like a prayer. Quiet. Meant. And now that he was gone, I heard it everywhere. In the empty chair across from mine at the breakfast table. In the last message he left scribbled on a sticky note I almost missed. For Caleb, my son. You didn't need to forgive me. Just knowing you came back was enough. It was taped to a book I hadn't seen before. His own writing inside. A journal. Not the frantic scraps I'd found in the shoebox, but something more deliberate. Something final. I read it slowly, page by page. Memories. Regrets. Reflections. Stories about his own father, a cruel man with a crueler silence. And how he swore he'd never become him. And how he did anyway. Until he didn't. Until he tried. Until he called me son. The funeral was small. Just me, the nurse who sat with him near the end, and the funeral home staff. No priest. No photos. Just his ashes in a plain urn I chose because it looked like the color of his old coffee mug. I didn't speak. There wasn't anything left to say in front of strangers. But when I got back home, I sat on the porch with the urn and I said everything. I told him about my son. How he's loud and tender and afraid of the dark. How sometimes I hear myself in the way I raise my voice, and hear him in the way I stop myself. I told him that my son calls me Daddy, like it's the safest word he knows. And that I call him Buddy. But maybe one day I'll call him son the way he said it, soft, like a promise. Because that's what the word became. Not a title. A vow. That no matter what happened, he had me. That he was wanted. Chosen. Named. The last entry in my father's journal was short. Only 6 words. I hope he calls me Dad. I closed the book, held it to my chest, and whispered, You are. Grief has a way of remaking you. It strips you down, pours light into the cracks, builds something out of the rubble. It makes you say things you swore you never would, forgive things you never thought you could. He called me son. And because of that one word, I finally knew who I was. Not lost. Not broken. Not abandoned. Named. And that was enough. We named him Elias. Not for the sound of it. Not because it was trendy or easy to spell. We named him Elias because it meant something. The Lord is my God. A phrase neither my wife nor I say often, but something in the meaning stuck. Something ancient and strong. Something about surrender. Something about finding grace where there used to be nothing but ache. And because, if I'm honest, it sounded a little like his name too. The one I still whisper sometimes at night when the house is quiet and I'm rocking my son back to sleep. The one I carved into a small brass plaque we buried with his ashes. The one I couldn't say for years without bitterness. Dad. Elias was born on a Sunday morning. First light breaking through the hospital window. My wife holding my hand so tightly I thought I might break, and then that cry. That first, fierce cry. He was loud. Beautiful. Mine. And in that moment, everything my father did, and didn't do, washed over me like a tide. The silence. The guilt. The letters. The moment he finally called me son. And the way I almost missed the chance to say it back. I held Elias in my arms and made a promise. One he couldn't hear. One I'll whisper again and again until he can. You'll never have to wonder who you are. Not while I'm here. Not while I'm breathing. I kept the letters. All of them. The ones my father wrote. The ones I found. Even the ones never meant for me. They're in a box now, tucked high on a shelf in my closet. Beside them, another box. Empty. For now. It's where I'll keep the letters I write to Elias. One a year. On his birthday. On quiet days. After fights. After moments of joy I want him to remember even if I forget to tell him in person. I'll tell him when I felt proud. When I felt afraid. When I didn't have the answers but tried anyway. Because that's what fatherhood is. Not perfection. Not certainty. Just showing up. And writing it down, just in case. My wife asked me once if I'd ever tell Elias about my father. Someday, I said. When he's old enough to understand that people can break and still try to build something from the pieces. She nodded. But I know it won't be a single story. It'll be fragments. Moments. Things I learned in reverse. Like how sometimes love doesn't look like staying. Sometimes it looks like regret. Sometimes it comes too late. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it arrives just in time for goodbye. The last line in my father's journal echoes in me more now than ever. I hope he calls me Dad. He got his wish. Not in life. But in legacy. Because I became the man I once begged him to be. Because I learned how to love by studying the shape of his absence. Because when I look at Elias and whisper my son, it's not just a name. It's a declaration. A redemption. A circle, finally closed. Until he called me son. I never knew how to become a father. Now I do. Now I am.